Welcome to our group, trauma survivors walking each other home. I'm
Thank you.
Denise Rokicki.
That's
Yeah.
that's Denise Rokicki, and I'm Holly Elissa Bruno. And this whole um, group, this whole podcast with people from all over got started 4 something years ago when a book I wrote called Happiness is Running Through the Streets to Find You, translating trauma's harsh legacy into healing came out. And what has evolved over the years is just this. We are two trauma survivors. Sometimes there are more of us, sometimes there's one of us, but we are usually two trauma survivors. And as Denise said, we're walking each other home. And we do a spontaneous program. So if you're looking for somebody that's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's not our usual way. Our usual way is to check in with each other and look at what this past week has been like. What's it like to be a trauma survivor? What did we run into? What did we face? How did we heal? And honestly, friends, that's what this is about. It's translating trauma's harsh legacy into healing. So today, here it is. We're in on the East Coast of the United States, so it's 3 p.m. here. Could be 8 o'clock in London. It could be 12 in Chennai. Whatever it is, we're glad you're with us either now or afterwards. And so I'm just going to ask Denise, who last week framed the program for us by saying she was in a, what did you call it? A
Funk.
twit, a funk. She was funked up, she said, and
Yeah.
we teased it out. And Denise, when you reflected on that, what did you find out about being a trauma survivor and funks and getting in and out of funks?
Well, that the coping mechanism of reaching out to helpful people and recognizing that I was feeling and what I was feeling and able to figure it out. And that helps. I recovered much quickly, more quickly than I would have in the past.
And I don't want to bring back the yuck, but just so people who weren't with us could know, what were some of the things that you think triggered you to feel like, ooh, this doesn't feel good, this doesn't feel right? What were some of
Uh,
the
I was
traditional
tricked
triggers?
into worthless or not worthy.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that is the biggie. That's the biggie. It also has to do with manipulation, right?
Yes, I felt tricked.
Mm-hmm. And tricked is the last thing we can bear because as kids, we put our faith in people who tricked us over and over again until trust became very difficult. I think one of the hardest things to have as a trauma survivor is trust. What do you think about that, Denise? Or how do you feel about that?
Um, yeah, I do. I do have a hard time trusting people.
Yeah, I've had a hard time fully trusting myself because I mean I'm much better at it now, but the truth is I didn't trust myself because I was operating on being a false personality. I could count on that, but could I count on my true self to be there for me? You look like you had something to say. What were you feeling about that?
Also, yeah, I do have trouble trusting myself. Am I doing, what's the best for me?
That's a harsh thing.
But now and then I realized, yes, I did. I felt so good not going to that job the next day.
I bet you did. And if you weren't with us, what that meant was Denise was getting up early. She was picking out her clothes ahead of time. She had plans for the kids. And she was just meeting the kids. And it was, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And that's the kind of thing that for anybody who's not a trauma survivor, just starting a new job takes energy. But what's extra about starting a new job for a trauma survivor, do you think? What comes along with the territory that not everybody has?
I don't know.
Do you feel like you're going to automatically be loved and treated well?
Not necessarily. No, we don't trust. I mean, I don't trust that I will be treated fairly.
I, as a trauma survivor, for years have wondered, well, why is this person hiring me? What's really going on beneath the surface? And part of that is the imposter syndrome. I just heard a great joke that says if we thought we were imposters before this, yeah, but it's a political joke, so I'll let it go. But anyway, oh my gosh, the point is that if I thought I was an imposter before, come on, everybody has a shield to a
Right,
certain degree. Like the
right,
last time I presented at NACI, the person that was presenting with me, Angela Bear Persico, she created these shields, and she bought all kinds of things that people could put on the front of their shields to say, "This is who I am to the world." This is, as you meet me, this is who I am.
right,
Happy, blah blah blah. But on the inside of the shield, people didn't have to show that to anybody. What we asked them to do was on the inside of the shield to somehow show what were they hiding. What were they hiding that they didn't necessarily want people to know? And the point for trauma survivors, at least for me as a trauma survivor, is that the more transparent I can be, the happier I am. But to be transparent means I've got to be with people that I trust.
right,
When I am, there's very little distance between what's on the front and what's on the back. But when I'm not, I got boundaries. And boundaries are good, but they can also stop me from being close to people when I really could be close to them. You ever
right.
experienced when you
Yeah,
had too
full
strong of
genuine. I want to desperately be genuine. I want to project myself genuinely. So, but if you have a shield, some of it's not right.
That's right. What would you put on the outside if you were to do it now and the workshop had said, here's a clean slate, a clean shield. What do you want to put on the front of it so people can see what you want them to see about you? What would teacher Denise put on the front of that?
Safety
Good.
would be
You'll be
my
safe with me.
right,
Mm-hmm.
right across the middle. Capital letters, big block, all caps. Yeah, safety.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I think for me, I would want to say, if you choose to, you can be yourself with me. If you choose to, you don't have to cover up who you are with me. And same with you. If I feel safe with you, I will not cover up who I am with you. And more over the years, I'm living with people that I don't mean in my home, but living with people with whom I can be myself. That's kind of that's a prerequisite these days. I don't spend a lot of time with people that I have to pretend to. I had a silly thing going on in my neighborhood and I'm not a gossiper. I probably was as a kid because that's what I learned to do to survive. But no, I gossiped. I will say that. But I have not been a gossiper for like 20, 25 years. It does no harm. It does no good. And it hurts not just the other person, but me. It's not doing any good. So when I found out in my neighborhood that X said to Y and Y said to Z, that I had said something I hadn't said, I called up, I said to the person, what's going on here? I never said this. And her response was, well, I trust the person who told me. I said, great. Why don't you send the person who told you I said that to me so I can talk it through? Because since I never said it to anybody, I'm wondering who heard something that was anyway. She said, well, I trust the other person. So I said, that's it. And that was it for my neighborhood. Maybe that's too strong a boundary, but I have friends, I talk with people, I chat up with them, but do I invite them into my house? I did all the time. No, not anymore. I don't need to be in an environment besides the one we're in the United States right now.
Right.
It's in an unsafe environment. I need safety. So I hang with people that I can really trust and I can tell the truth to. And I often introduce myself to people as, if you want to have a heart to heart, which is the old fashioned way of saying, if you want to be your true self as a trauma survivor, we can do heart to hearts. And I want to say one other thing. I have a dear friend I've been close to for going on 37 years. We were in Boston together. She was in the public schools in Boston, and we met every month. We'd see each other at 12-step meetings, but we met every month. We were really close. We went through a lot with each other. And then when I moved away from Boston, we still saw each other, but actually COVID ended it. We weren't able to get together, and she's not as happy talking. She doesn't like to do technology. And then it turned out she got cancer, lung cancer. And she fought it for years and finally just decided, I'm going to stop fighting it. And so I've been in touch with her. And I keep thinking each time I'm in touch, this will be my last time. And I ask myself, have I told her how much I love her? Have I said all these things I want to say? And I believe I have. But I got back from a recent trip and I thought, holidays are coming up. My friend seems to still be on Earth. And so I wrote her and I said, sweetie, if you're still here, I would love to be with you, but I only want to be with you if that's something that's really good for you. So she wrote back right back and she said, yeah, I can do an hour. She said, my energy starts to drop after an hour. So that's a beautiful thing. And we
Yep.
always heart to hearts, heart to hearts. There was no need to pretend. She was gay in a gay relationship in the Boston public schools, which wasn't at the time the easiest thing to be.
Right.
And so, but it just was, we were just friends and we still are. But this thing about safety, I'm wondering, Denise, what do you feel about this? The fact that the world around us, except for our own personal world, is not as safe. It's just not as safe in America for
No, it
people.
feels like we're in really tumultuous times.
Have you been watching the news at all or paying attention? I have not for the last week, I say.
I have not been either, trying not to intentionally. Sometimes I'll turn on Sling TV on my computer for like
Mhm.
MSNBC. Like I'll probably watch Rachel tonight.
Right. That's who I watch. I watch her and Lawrence O'Donnell. And I also read The Atlantic magazine. That's been around since the 19th century and it has a reputation for being really honest. So, what I read as I was flying back on the Atlantic magazine was that one of the people nominated to a major post, I think maybe the Secretary of Defense or something, has was told to leave the military because of the tattoos he had on his body. And it wasn't just because he had tattoos. I guess he was asked to leave because one of his tattoos indicated he was part of an old and male Christian group that is in favor of getting rid of the 19th Amendment. When I read that, I just went, what? At least. It's like Black people for years. They said, well, for the longest time, at least we could tell the prejudice because people were right out there with it. Then it went underground.
Right.
Women, it's right out there now. Like the guy
It's
yelling at the airplane,
right
right
out
out.
there.
Oh my God. Have you run into that?
Well, no, I don't think personally yet, but I am certain I am. I mean, I'm going to, like, my brother-in-law is probably gonna call me lady, even though every time I see him, I say I don't identify as a lady. It offends me.
And he takes that as all the more reason to keep saying it.
Right. And the people there are very Republican, and the family that I'm going to be with is my sister's husbands and extended are Republican and well-to-do and privileged white male uh, environment, like supported in that role,
Mhm.
which is like, I don't live like that.
So, how do you feel about going there for a holiday?
I'm excited to see my nephew.
Yeah.
I adore him, and my sisters I adore. And, it's busy enough. There's enough people there that, especially if there's kids, I'll find something to do.
You will. And the kids
Right,
will come right for you if you
right.
don't go right there for them. Yeah, I understand. And that brings up a whole other topic, which is how on earth does a trauma survivor deal with the holidays? And have you been through different stages of that?
Yeah. When I lived across the country and I was not associating or physically being with my family, I still spoke once a month or so, but uh, it was great not feeling any obligation or, expectations from other people that are not your family of origin. It, they're easier to tolerate, I guess.
Mhm.
But expectations in my family are challenging.
Like, what's an example? Still
Uh, you
today,
know,
2024.
right. I'm the oldest daughter, so I'm expected to serve my mother now that she's old. That's probably the main one that I deal with now.
Wow. So, how does that work? Just describe to me how that works. If you're sitting at a table and people have the plates and the food in front of them,
No, like she says what needs to be done, generally speaking, but means Denise, go do it, kind of that type of
like,
situation. And she expects me to drive her here or there. She never asks, will you drive me to the store? No,
mhm.
she says, we're going to the store at 2 o'clock. Or,
What if you can't? What if you're booked with something?
well, because when I'm there, I am away from my own environment. So I don't have other things, I'm there.
Right. Gotcha. So when you're back in your home, it's not like she would call you and say, "We're going to the store now."
No, because I live 2.5 hours away.
That would do it. That would
Yeah.
do it. That would do it. So my story about being about the holidays and being a trauma survivor is that obligation. Obligation was the dominant theme. My father would threaten, if you don't do this and you don't do that. And he didn't have to say what was going to happen because I knew. And it was not pretty. And it was sexually upsetting and it was just horrible. When I went away to college at age 17, he sat me down and said, "You will write to your mother every week, every week." I said, "But I'm not the type of person that does things like that. I write when I have something to say, or I write when I'm done with preterms or something, whatever they were called." And he just said, "You will do this." So coming home for the holidays, that's what it was called. It was expected. And when I was a little kid, did you have this? There was always a family obligation. Some people probably do it happily, but there was an obligation that we had to visit both sides of the family and we had to show up. And the kids weren't expected to do much or be much except be quiet. But we got shown off. So here's Karen, she's in whatever grade. Here's Lynn, who she's in. Here's Holly. And that was it. They didn't want to hear from us after that. In fact, my Sicilian immigrant grandfather had a room set aside for kids, but it didn't have any books. It didn't have any windows. It didn't have any games. He just sent us there and told us to be quiet. We couldn't even talk with each other. So
Wow.
that, yeah, the whole obligatory thing was we would spend time in Rochester, New York with my father's family. We would spend time in Olean, New York with my mother's family. We made sure we saw everybody. Um, and we didn't play much. I mean, it wasn't fun. Christmas wasn't fun. And so it was obligation. And the obligation at home, I want to ask you about what obligations you had, because one of the ones I had was be grateful for anything you got, anything you get. And I just put that on Facebook because I went early to Mobile, Alabama, to my favorite oyster shop to get oysters
Yeah,
for
I
my.
saw that.
Yeah, honey, I do that for myself. I've been doing it for 3 years, and sometimes I'm kind of stunned that I think I have the right to do this. And then I said, "Yes, of course I can. Of course I can." But I remembered what my parents often would say to me, which was because my birthday was near Christmas, New Year's Eve, not very far away. So my parents would say they'd probably give me a pack of white nylon underwear. They gave us necessities. I don't remember. I might remember very few fun gifts. I do remember getting a pogo stick one year. That was awesome. But mostly we got things that we needed. And the word was be grateful for what you get. So when I said, wait a minute, I noticed that my sisters are having a birthday party and I'm not. And they get a gift for their birthday and a gift for Christmas. What's going on? And I guess my mother heard that or somebody heard that. So at last they had a birthday in July party for me. And I was so ashamed the whole time. One of the
Aw,
trauma survivors is we get guilt feeling when we stand up for ourselves.
right.
So
You
they
don't
weren't
deserve.
happy. I don't deserve it. No. So it wasn't a fun birthday party because I kept feeling this isn't right. There's something going on here. I mean, I would thank them now. Thank you for doing that. But
Right,
it was obligation. I think they caught on.
right.
So did you have obligatory things at Christmas besides be thankful for what you got?
Um, well, we kind of were spoiled. Like we did get what we requested at
Wow.
Christmas.
Okay.
And I was like a sneak. I would go look and find everybody's presents and tell them and mine. Yeah. Obligatory,
Hmm.
like we were expected to shovel the neighbors' sidewalks if the snow came, if they were old. My mom was kind of good about helping elderly.
Good.
She encouraged us to do that.
Did she do that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, she probably talked to old women at bingo or
Yeah, that's right. You have a different background. Your mother, in some ways, was from a somewhat privileged background.
yeah, but then, she married uh according to her father under her.
But didn't they think that your father's family had money because of the business they ran?
Business, right. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. She probably thought he did, but he didn't.
Okay. Anyway, what I'm talking about here is also people coming up during the Depression and having nothing. So if you get something, you got to be grateful for it. But when I think of Christmas, I think of obligation. When I think of being a trauma survivor in that family, obligation is what I had.
Right. And that is what my abuse was. I thought it was my obligation because my mom didn't like sex.
And how did you know that? She
I
told
just, um, well, she wouldn't talk about it. Like we try to, we were three girls, we try to talk about things and she was not. I don't know. I think she might have said she doesn't like it. That's just what I believed.
well, you're probably right because all of those things that are communicated are often true, right? I think that became true for my mother as she got older too. And when my two sisters were around, it wasn't quite as intense. The house was full, but when it was just my father and me, and my mother was off, literally being crazy, my father was a man, had to get his needs met.
Right.
Yeah.
And the culture supported that. And here today, every one of those people men that Donald Trump has selected for important positions are pedophiles or sex offenders or pigs, the worst type of male. They think they can just take whatever they want. And that is what is so disturbing about this. But this is the last hurrah for, to me, I believe this is the last hurrah for this patriarchy. I'm thinking of it as a pussy boil, and it's going to pop with him being who he is.
That's a yucky image and a very true one. I hear you.
Yes,
I hear you. And honestly, thank you for raising that, because here's what's impossible for me to miss as a trauma survivor. I am aware of where safety is in the world. My genes are set up to look for safety. My cells know if I'm safe or not safe. Just like when I boarded the airplane with the guy that was in a rage and he sat next to me, I had to do all kinds of things to go within myself to calm down the intense negative energy that he was putting my way. So, what I feel is going on because of the election is when one after another of men or women who disrespect women are nominated, the message is clear over and over again. It was just as clear as when you and I talked before the election about the saying from the candidate at the time, I'll protect women even if they don't want to be protected.
right,
There's a lot of code language being spoken now.
right. Which that's what I'm going to be exposed to in Thanksgiving. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the code stuff.
Yeah. People are going to be happy. I mean, I've gotten to this place now. I can talk with people that were Trump supporters and listen to them. And I don't expect them to listen to me. I see it as I'm doing this for my education. Because the more
Right,
I see that the guy sitting next to me at the oyster bar, or he would say oyster bar, at the oyster bar in Mobile, Alabama, in the beginning, he was happy to vote for Trump. And I said, well, tell me what you're hoping is going to happen. Well, I work in Florida and I see my work going down, down, down the last 4 years, and I'm sure it's going to come up, up, up. And I said, wow, that's fascinating. In New England, we got a lot of building going on. We got a lot of solar stuff going on. We got a lot of infrastructure stuff going on. He said, well, but that didn't compute with him, whether it's going on in Florida or not. But then as we talked and we kind of got to know each other, and I let him know he was safe with me, and I didn't pump his, I didn't jump on him about what a fool he was, because in his life, he's not a fool. He's doing what he needs to do.
right,
As we continued to talk and he started to trust, he said, the one thing I'm not happy about is that people from other countries, if they're not citizens, they're going to get kicked out. I said, yeah, that seems like a really strong message. I said, my grandmother, who never learned to speak English, my immigrant grandmother would have been kicked out. And all of her kids would have been able to stay because they were American citizens. Her husband became a citizen. And so, what would this woman do? If she got sent back, what would she do? And the conversation went on more and it went on more. And I told him that I work with Head Start. And he got the message about who I was. But I didn't tell him any of the highfalutin stuff because I didn't, highfalutin like titles of jobs. I didn't need to do that. I was just sitting there enjoying oysters and sitting next to this guy. Anyway, toward the end, he pulled out his wallet and he held up the pictures. And there was a woman with really beautiful dark hair, about, in her 40s, with two little boys. One was 7 and one was 4. And they had Hispanic names. And he said, this is my girlfriend, and these are her kids. And to me, these kids are members of the family, but they're not. And they get sent back, and I'm worried about that. I said, yeah, I'm sorry that you have to worry about that. And I'm really sorry for those kids who were born here, that they're worried about that. And I'm sorry for their mother. It must be scary a lot of the time. But I said, I was just listening. This is one thing I did listen to. The person who's in charge of Homeland Security, I think, he said, we don't have to deport everybody. If we deport one person in the family, the rest of the people can leave with them.
right,
And that's code for we don't give a sweet bippy about your family. If
right,
you're a person of color, if you're an alien, if you're from someplace else, your family doesn't rate family status here.
Right. Very disappointing.
It was sad because I could see his anxiety, but I also think a lot of people voted based on anxiety. You know, who's going to take care of me? Do I trust this bright Black woman to look out for me when I've been so nasty all these years to Black people? You know, none of that got said out loud, but I feel that might be part of it.
Right.
So have you noticed other codes being said or just in the way people are with each other, or even, yeah, have you noticed code being, we can't say things directly because we might get into a fight, or worse, we might start getting into trouble.
I actually have been gathering with different lesbian groups and
Mm-hmm.
political groups and feminist groups and having friends over for dinner, more creating little community like-minded hubs.
Just very savvy. That's a really
Yeah.
savvy. Would you recommend that to trauma survivors?
Yeah. Groups are really helpful because you can get to know people. It's not like making a relationship with one person and focusing on one person. It's having a group of people where you're all relating together. It's, I don't know, easier.
It is easier and it feels to me safer.
Right, safer.
When safer when I gather with trauma survivors, even though there's some things that we don't often speak about, I'll speak about them, but I'll say first off, I'm going to talk about how I feel about the election. I'm not going to go into politics. I'm going to talk about my feelings, because things that we're not supposed to talk about in general, and also at many 12-step meetings, are religion, politics, sex. The three controversial things. Well, a bunch of other things that are controversial, like being honest.
Right.
That's pretty controversial today. So you're right. That's a safe way to do things. And I make sure that almost every day I Zoom with other trauma survivors. And the work I do is now directly about trauma. I mean, I'm grateful when somebody invites me to come speak. There's a group wanting me to speak about secondary trauma. Have you seen secondary trauma happen at your work with others?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. But here's how it's defined. Secondary trauma is when I myself haven't faced trauma, Denise, but I'm exposed to people like children who are traumatized and they bring their everything with them.
Yes.
And so working with any group of little kids, we know that bunches of them are going to go home to not very supportive backgrounds and they're not going to be able to talk about it. Don't talk about it is one of the rules. So one of the things about secondary trauma is that either we work with people who have been traumatized and that gets to us just as much, or we witness trauma. You know, people who are out there advocating, like I just talked with this wonderful woman who went to another country to meet with young women who were underage girls, actually, who were in the sex trade. She went to talk with them. I said, oh my God, how did you do that? How'd you do that? And I talk about going back to this country because I have had really good experiences there. It's not a place she really wants to go back to. So that's secondary trauma.
Right.
She went into the places where these women are kept, these young girls are kept.
Right.
So that's secondary trauma. And honestly, if it's not from the students or if it's not from going into the work where the work is harmful to people, because the majority of early childhood professionals are trauma survivors, we're with people all the
Right.
time that are covering their
That's
wounds.
what I
So now that
found.
you know what,
Uh,
yeah,
so
no, I
many
mean,
of my coworkers were trauma survivors. Now, sometimes, often it seemed like maybe the social workers would
mhm.
get that secondary.
Oh, yeah.
trauma because they do a lot of probing about family matters and nutrition and health and household. And so I think they can get secondary trauma from that. That's the first thing I thought of.
You're right. And what about the family? What do they call the people that go into the family?
Advocate, family advocate, which that's what I think of as social workers, even though they're
Mhm.
not all qualified, but that's what they're social working.
And doesn't Head Start still expect people to do home visits? I mean, not during COVID, but that was a big part of Head Start, right? For
Yes.
teachers.
Although well, yeah, yeah, we do home visits. And actually the family advocates or social workers end up not doing home visits because it's more convenient to meet with the families at the center when their children are in care. They can
And
be
what
a
if
lot
they,
more efficient in their paperwork production.
and they've got a lot of paperwork because if it isn't documented, it didn't happen. But
Right.
teachers have a lot of paperwork too. So what do we miss out on when we don't visit homes anymore?
I loved visiting the homes. That was the most important thing to me. And we had one form that was like called the first home visit form. And I always gave that to my teaching assistant and had her interview the parent. And I sat down on the floor with the kid, and it was heaven. I loved home visits. You can learn so much. You know,
Yeah.
there's so many different kinds of home situations that I mean, I had to be in it and see it to know the variety.
Yes. Yeah. And
Because
just to
we
see
think everybody's just like us, normal.
where does the child sleep? I mean, in one group of people, it was, the cousins or the people who were called cousins, even if they weren't cousins, if they needed a place to stay, every kid in the bed that was already in the bed knew roll over, make room.
Right, right,
It's what they did. And that seems really loving to me. And it is really loving unless someone rolls in the bed that's not safe.
right.
And I've read about that happening.
It happens,
It happens. And then what do you do if you can't talk about it?
especially boys, because
Mhm.
boys are socialized to take what they want.
There is a powerful writer for the New York Times, and I'm blocking his name right now, but I can see him, and I read his book, and his book became an opera performed by the Metropolitan Opera Company. So it's easy to find out. But Charles Blow, I always respected him because he just looks you in the eye looks right through the camera and tells the truth. Charles Blow is out there, and he wrote about what it was like to have somebody, a relative, an alleged relative, come in and do things he didn't want done. And you can't talk about that. You have to keep it quiet.
Right.
I'm sure that happened in my family. And no one would
Definitely
say
happened.
anything. Yep. And it was so, we were so dissociated.
Right,
It's like walking into the kitchen every morning after my mother had had one of her breakdowns. And it was terribly scary the night before. It was like the gates of hell had opened up, and she would be standing at the kitchen sink with her back to anybody that walked in the kitchen and just scrubbing dishes, and she didn't turn around. So it made it easy to stay dissociated. And she
right,
wasn't going to talk about it. Nothing happened. I wasn't supposed to talk about it. And I was supposed to go off to school and act as if. So since we're starting what's called the trifecta, unless there's something else you wanted to say, okay. People who are in recovery for drugs and alcohol, they call Thanksgiving the beginning of the trifecta, which is the three parts of drinking season. Because we're going to
uh-huh,
be with, it isn't about drinking, it's about we're going to go be with families. And the only way to self medicate against the pain of being with a family is to drink. So for people that have that kind of addiction, they say they start drinking before Thanksgiving. They drink all the way through Christmas. And they don't stop there because God knows the big holiday is coming
Right.
on
Yeah.
New
Yeah.
Year's Eve. And then New Year's resolutions come. But it's trauma survivors usually that drink. Why do I say that? Because our cells have been stripped of the protection that would allow us to say, okay, I can sit with this guy and he's getting drunk and he's not going to hurt me. I don't know any child that feels safe with a drunken adult.
Uh-uh.
So there it is. So it's called the trifecta, and that's what works for people who are alcohol addicts. Do you think it's a trifecta, the whole holiday season for trauma survivors in general?
Probably. Yeah. You know, when I first moved back to this side of the country, back engaging with my family, I would
Mm.
do Thanksgiving with my sister and Christmas with my family in Columbus because they're 5 hours apart. And yeah, it's anxiety producing. I mean, either way. Now my sister's not speaking to me, so I haven't been visiting her.
And she's not coming to the gathering on Thanksgiving?
No, she hasn't been in touch with them in
Okay.
30 years, probably.
Wow.
But I've kept trying to reach out to her again and again. But this
Is
time
that
was
what you,
particularly difficult. She was posting like 20 posts a day about how your family will do you wrong, never trust anybody, just all that kind of stuff, that negative stuff. I had to temporary snooze her. It's called snooze instead of block because I don't need to read all that. I know that she is disappointed in what the results of my visiting. I didn't visit her on the day she wanted me to. Wanted
right, I
to visit
remember.
at a different time. And so then after I hadn't talked to her for like a month, then she messaged me back to let me know that she won't bother me anymore.
Ah,
So that's where we are right now. But
is it hard?
it's a little hard, but it's a pattern for our whole entire life. Christmas was always miserable for mostly her, but she liked to spread that around.
Yeah. And I
So,
hear you.
and
Go
she's a
ahead.
drinker.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
Oh,
yeah,
so
it's a trifecta for her. Yeah.
oh, okay, so she self-medicates
Yes.
in that way. Ah, I get you. That's hard. I mean, even if it's a pattern and we know it, it still hurts.
It is. It does. That's why I had to snooze her because I could not listen to her say those things about me because I know it's not my intention, but I can't be who she wants me to be, and she can't be who I want her to be. So we're better not dealing with each other that often.
This possibility never comes up, which is, look, I'm going to be me. You're going to be you. Let's just let it be. You be you. I be me. And I'm not going to try to, grant me the serenity to accept the people I cannot change, courage to change the one I can, and the wisdom to know that one is me.
Right. And
And it
that's what
makes
I
it
told her the last time, that
right.
I got to be me, you got to be you. And they don't match up good right now.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that you said just sparked the word to come into my heart, which is victim. It's hard to be friends with a victim. How can I befriend a victim? What are my choices?
But when
I
it's
mean,
your sister, you keep trying.
I know, I hear you. Yeah, I mean, my older sister she was very, very ill in Columbus, Westerville, Ohio. And I kept trying, I kept being with her. And then I finally said, she's not going to change. My job is to change so I can feel at home with her being herself and at home with me being myself. But over the years, and she was sickly for like a long time, like 20 years. Over the years, it was sometimes just really so hard that I would give myself permission, maybe every hour, every 2 hours, to just leave. I'd just go out, buy some flowers, just go out walking if it was good weather, just write in my journal, text a friend, because it was exhausting. And here's the truth about being a trauma survivor and having victims in our lives. I was raised as a victim, but a silent victim
Right.
and a non-complaining victim. And victims say things like, well, we don't ask for much. Have you ever heard that? I don't ask for much.
Oh, my
And
sister
what's
says
the
that all
real?
the time, but she does. When I would visit, there would be a list.
Right. And that's a code. That's a code for victims. I don't ask for much. The code with my mother, who was a professional victim in many ways, she could not leave my father because she would be out without any money. Let's face it. All those women married men that could take care of them. Anyway, take care of them, maybe
Which
financially,
most of them didn't.
right? Not ever emotionally, because they didn't
No.
have a clue. But my father would say to me, or my mother would say to me, I had my heart set on that. That and, I don't ask for much. Those two were threats. They were threats.
Right.
If you, what's the code? What do they mean by that? He said your sister had all this stuff. She'd say, I don't ask for much, but then she'd have this whole big thing for you to do. And what if you didn't do them?
Well, finally, the last time I went, I didn't. I set new boundaries that I'm here to visit, not clean up your place.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't like that.
Did you get silent treatment?
Not until after I left, because she doesn't, you know, she waits to do her emotions later. Like she'll dissociate
Mm-hmm.
from, and then later she'll be mad that, and
Yep.
maybe silent treatment or maybe, harass me on Facebook.
Mm-hmm. Shaming. So you know what you just said about her behavior is true, was true for me too. I learned to not have feelings in the moment.
Right. I
I didn't
learned
do
that too.
it. Yeah. So she's just doing what we
Coping.
learned.
Right. She's coping.
However, there's something else going on. I might be shutting down my feelings for the moment to protect myself, but am I also shutting down my feelings to get even with somebody else later?
Right. That's another, right.
That is, and here's the thing about victim. I learned the term victim abuser. I don't know if you've heard that, but I learned it like decades ago. But victim abuser, as you can imagine, is someone who sees herself as the victim and uses her victimhood to punish everybody else.
Yep.
I'm so hurting. I don't ask for much. I have my heart set on this. How could you possibly not come through for me?
Right.
And what happened with my older sister, the worse physical shape she got in and mental shape too, she wouldn't want to hire someone to travel with her. She had chronic progressive MS and she just was really sad. And she got cancer in the jaw as a result of the meds she was taking for MS. So when there would be family gatherings like weddings and stuff, she wouldn't take anybody with her. She'd fly out with somebody, but then she'd expect one of her sisters, because that's a sisterly role, I guess, to take
Mm.
care of her. So there was a time when she was getting rides back and forth to her hotel. So she was getting back and forth to things. However, once she got back to her hotel and she wanted to take a shower, she called me and said, come over. This is like 15 years ago. I said, well, I got to help her. I didn't,
Right. Right.
I didn't think I had a choice. And she's bigger than me. She was thin, but she was dead weight, heavy. And she fell down on her bum. And I felt so awful. And she was just smiling because she knew how to dissociate. It's okay. But it wasn't okay. It wasn't okay with me. I said, Karen, I am so sorry. And I just can't do this. I'll support you in hiring someone to be with you so that you don't have to worry about any of this stuff. You don't have to worry about getting food. You don't have to worry about anything. But it took her years to do that. So much so that my other sister didn't invite, there were only three of us, didn't invite Karen to one of the weddings because the other sister knew the whole wedding would revolve around
Taking care of her.
That's right. That's right. So that victim abuser thing, I'm not saying people do it consciously, but I'm saying it feels like when somebody has no rights and has been victimized, that they can start taking it out on other people, but they're excused, thank you very much, because they're ill or because they're hurting or because they never got what they needed.
Right.
I see this a lot in families. I've been noticing since the election that there are a lot of people walking around in some kind of braces or some kind of like foot, there's limping, they're in wheelchairs. I think it's manifesting the malaise is manifesting in people's physical feelings.
Physically. Yeah.
Yeah. But I just see that in every family, just about, there's somebody who's the identified patient. And that's a term that I'm not a psychologist, but I think psychologists use to say when a family's got dysfunction, when a family's got trauma, there's usually one person that takes on the role of being the identified patient. And
Right.
there are benefits to that. Your
Right.
sister fainted,
Right.
held
She
her
got to
breath.
go to play with a sandbox with a psychiatrist inside his office. Oh,
Right.
I was so jealous.
Somebody got to play. Yeah. And yet she didn't get better.
Right. She never got better.
Right. And I remember the story. It's very poignant. You tried to hold your breath so you would faint.
Right. I couldn't do it.
Couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. Yeah. I remember this. I'm very embarrassed about this, but I remember being with friends at like a family's house, and the parents were all off doing something, and the kids were like, we were just sitting around watching TV. And so I was getting sleepy, but I'd pretend to fall asleep. Why did I pretend to fall asleep? Because I wanted to experience people being kind to me. I keep my eyes shut and I keep my breathing down just because I wanted to hear people whispering, well, be quiet because Holly's sleeping, or, and I felt
Right.
so ashamed and guilty about that. But
Oh,
that was a victim trying to get some kind of attention. And I never felt
right.
good about it. But I felt in the moment the promise of somebody whispering nice things about me.
Right.
Oh, it was sad. So during the holidays, I think victim status comes out really big. How do you see? I mean, so we've got the identified patient, but how do women traditionally, who are trauma survivors, how do we, the traditional at home women, and I'm not saying this is true for everybody at home, but back in the day, when your mother was a mother and my mother was a mother, how did women deal as trauma survivors with the holidays?
Valium, alcohol.
Valium, Valley of the Dolls, right? I didn't ever read that book, but I watched the movie.
I didn't watch the movie or read the book, but I know that they took a lot of Valium and they were like Stepford wives or something.
Yeah. They just were out of it all the time. It didn't matter if their husbands were having affairs with other people. It didn't matter if the
Right. That's fine. Right.
TV dinners came out, set the kid up with a TV dinner. I remember those. Peel off the aluminum foil on a TV dinner. You're all set. Kids come
Yep.
home. You don't have to bother with them. You just put them in front of the TV. or
It
tell
was
them
a
they have to
special
go out.
treat at TV dinner. Hmm.
Just like more recently, it's a special treat to take your kids out to Mickey D's, you know?
Right. Yep.
So many kids grew up on Mickey D's. Anyway, let's look at the time. Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left. What else do you feel, Denise, as a trauma survivor, might be coming up, or have you witnessed or experienced as a trauma survivor that we might talk about that could help people who are watching?
Um, keep on learning and growing, because in learning, like from experts like yourself, I feel like I've learned so many facts that, help me watch myself heal by understanding, oh, that's what trauma survivors do, and then coping with that, dealing with it a different way,
And
or
I view
trying an
you,
alternative.
thank you for saying that. And I view you as an expert too, because I think everybody that's a trauma survivor has had to make her own way. We didn't have, I mean, we just didn't have other people we were allowed to talk to. You're right. It was the Me Too movement that started people being able to say, yeah, I was raped. Yeah, I was. Yeah, I was. But before that, no. And so you have made sense of your own life, often without help. When you started getting help, that was great. But I didn't, you we couldn't talk about it. So I think each of us is an expert on our own lives. And here's something I've noticed, and I'm noticing as I get older. I'm noticing that the holidays exhaust me. When I was a kid, my survival mechanism was to just keep going. I'd help my mother decorate the tree. I helped my mother with this. I'd cook, I'd bake this, I'd bake that. I'd just do all those things when I was home. And then I didn't have to feel my feelings.
Right. I was a big helper also.
Big helper. And then when I had friends with cars, I would just take off with them, but I made sure that I took care of business at home first. And it was clear that I had to be there a certain amount of time. When I caught on to how bad things were, I started booking a hotel instead of staying with my parents. And that really angered my father. He was so angry. And I think it wasn't just because I was telling him, no, I'm not going to stay with you. I think it was because it might have made a statement to the world
We're
that
not
this
the
wasn't
perfect
working.
family. Right.
That's right. Both of my sisters stayed there no matter what, no matter what. And they would take their children there no matter what. I would not have my children there for overnights, unless I was right there with them. I did once, and then I felt this is not safe. It's not safe. So I think another thing to watch out for is, for me, I need to get a lot of rest, take
Right.
care of myself. And when memories come up, like my Christmas tree's up already. I love it. I have a wonderful person that cleans my home. And I say, could you put up the Christmas tree? Because I'm not so good with balance anymore. Anyway, she put it up. I came back, I spread it out, I put the lights on. I love it. I love it. And there will be probably props coming up of Christmas memories.
Right.
And I don't have that many happy Christmas memories. I have memories of obligation.
Right.
So let's wrap and let's just reflect for a moment. What would you like to ask our listeners, or what would you like to say to them as we enter the grand trifecta, especially in a time when our country is entering its own trifecta?
Right. Um, Notice your obligations. Notice what obligations you're engaging in, and see if that's what you really want to do.
Mhm. Thank you. That's a really good point. My recovery has more and more meant letting go of obligation and replacing it with making choices. When I choose to be with my family, I choose to do that. I chose to fly in to be with my cousin's family when my cousin died. She was the one that would join us on this program. I don't choose to go to family reunions. On one side, I'm not invited anymore, but I'm also not welcome. My true self isn't welcome. Yeah. So obligation is a big thing about holidays. And I think a lot of us drank, self-medicated because we felt so obligated we couldn't make choices. And if I can't make choices, how do I know who I am? So do you have a wish for Thanksgiving, sweetie? Or the
that
holiday?
that the gravy's delicious.
I love it. And my wish is that all of this understanding we have now, that this country belonged to Indigenous people and still belongs to Indigenous people. And talk about trauma. Talk about trauma. Let us remember whose land we're on.
Right.
And
Who are
honor
the
those
immigrants?
right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So to all of those Indigenous Americans who had your world taken away, you get to witness folk, same thing, in a whole different way. It's not the same thing, but having safety taken away, whenever safety is taken away, that's treacherous. Yeah. It was with Native Americans, with Indigenous people, there's the, what do you call it? The genetic inheritance, the epigenetics of trauma gets passed
Right.
down.
Right.
Do you think you got that? Do you think you got some passed down trauma?
I do.
I do too. Couldn't miss it. Being a woman,
Right.
couldn't miss it. Well, sweetheart, I wish you a very happy day of gratitude, and maybe you could have a plan for when you're called lady. You could say, Ladybug. That's what you can call me, Ladybug.
No, I don't even want Ladybug. I want him to call me Denise or woman.
And he can't do that. So knowing
He
he can't,
cannot use that word woman. It's so scary. Or lesbian. How about
oh
that?
my God, that would
The
creep him
L
to
word.
the
Oh,
maybe there's a joke you can tell yourself inside every time he says that, so you can have a smile on your face and just say, I'm so glad to be myself and be here.
right. Something like that.
Whatever you do, you can't change him. I just would invite you to do whatever you need to do to feel like,
Well, he's going to be the host, so he'll be nubbing with all the privileged men,
oh,
basically.
great. Well, they'll be busy and there's a football game probably, right?
Right. And I can always slip off to the side where the candy and kids are.
Is there more than one kid or just your nephew?
It depends on if the cousins come, which there's 3 cousins.
Yay. Well, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Cousins probably would love to have you there.
Yeah, I always sit with them and we talk, and I've learned to know them over the years.
Good. Well, sweetheart, I will see you back here next
Monday.
Monday,
Yep.
next Monday afternoon, and we'll see how the trifecta is proceeding.
Yep. I wish you well. One
Wish you
third.
well.